All right, welcome everyone to episode 76 of the Phoenix Report. I am Jack Connor, and to anyone who's been on my show, or I should say anyone who's followed my show over the last couple of years, knows that mainly this is just a forum for me to talk about stuff that I like, whether it's music or pro wrestling or comic books or movies or stuff like that. And we all usually have a good time with it, and not to say we won't have a good time with this one, but this episode is a little bit more personal to me. I've mentioned before on the show that I was a student at St. Petersburg Catholic High School in St. Petersburg, Florida, from around 1999 to 2003 when I graduated. And at one point, every now and then, they would bring in some motivational speakers to talk to the students, whether faith-based or otherwise. As you'd imagine, it's a Catholic school. So, but I remember one guy in particular who came along and just for whatever reason, it just kind of resonated with me. And he had a lot of interesting stuff to say. And I don't know, maybe I identified with him a little bit. I saw, here's a young guy coming in. He's from up north. He's from Brooklyn, New York. I had moved down just before high school. I had moved down to Florida from Pennsylvania, right outside of Philadelphia. So, it was like sort of a connection there. Seeing another guy from the Northeast, another guy who just kind of talked like a regular dude, which I appreciated, and like, he was just like, all right, this is a guy from the neighborhood. I can understand, I can appreciate what this guy's talking about. And just the big takeaway I got from it was this, was like sort of his catchphrase and ended up being the title of his first book, 10 seconds can change your life. And I thought like, wow, that's a really interesting take. Because that's absolutely right. I mean, look, we can't control everything that happens to us, but like, sometimes in the heat of the moment, things can happen to us that completely turn everything upside down. And it's up to us how we take those things and how we handle it and how we process it. And I think that's just good general life advice. And this guy, had a really interesting story. I mean, yes, there were elements of tragedy in it, but how he overcame it was really inspiring to me. And not only did I see him speak at my school, but it was probably about a year or two after that first that first speaking engagement he had at my school. I ended up quick side story, but while I was in high school, I played in the jazz band. I played bass guitar, and of course, I ended up playing in rock bands later after high school. Most of you guys know that already who follow me, but for those of you who don't, that's just a little quick Reader's Digest bio on me. But I remember one time with the jazz band, we would play certain certain functions that I don't know if it was necessarily school related, but it was like some sort of like honor society dinner that was happening in downtown St. Petersburg. And I had heard like, oh, we've got a motivational speaker coming in, and I remember, and I looked up, and it was the same guy. It was like, hey, I know that guy. And I remember even before in sound check, I would when we were warming up. And I didn't even put two and two together that this is the same guy. I remember just messing around on bass, playing like Whole Lotta Love from Led Zeppelin, just kind of going off stuff that we weren't playing while the show was going on. But I remember this guy in the back's like, "Oh right, man, that's stuff from my generation, right on." And at first I was like, "Who's this dude? Like, what's he talking about?" But then I kind of put two and two together, and I got to meet and I got to talk to him after he did his bit on stage, and he had a meet and greet, and he was just very encouraging. I remember kind of telling him a little bit about how music was like kind of like an outlet for me, and I remember him just being so supportive. He'd be like, "God bless you, son, keep it going." And so I mean, from time to time over the years, I would think about this guy, and I'm like, man, whatever happened to him? And then just the other day, I don't know what it was, but I just kind of started Googling and found some of his YouTube videos, and I was thinking like, oh, I think he might be based in the Tampa area now. Because I remember he used to live in Texas, and he can get into his story, but like I thought, I'm like, you know what? I've been doing my podcast thing a little bit. Why don't I reach out to this guy, see if I can get him? Because why not? And sure enough, he answered right away. So I'm really happy to have this gentleman on my show. He is he's the author of several books, including 10 Seconds Can Change Your Life. I don't know if I'm getting the title exactly right, but he also has a new book called You Matter, It Doesn't, Leaving Your It Behind. And I'm sure he'll get into the meaning of that a little bit. But I would love to welcome to my show Mr. Bobby Petrocelli.
Jack, man, it's absolutely awesome and honored to be with you. I got to tell you straight up, you hit the nail on the head why I do what I do and why I actually been doing what I've been doing for almost 30 years.
Yeah.
I always tell people, I'm a motivational speaker, but I'm more of an educational, inspirational speaker because I love how many things I get to do in life over the last decade or so because people like you or others saw me in high school. Now they're teachers or they're doing other things like you're doing, and they want to bring me in because they talk about how much something I said or did in their school impacted their life. And that means the world to me because I'm not one of those people who just want to come in and blow sunshine up your nose for the moment. How could I speak into your life, Jack, or anybody else's life and have a greater impact where this is something you can carry with you to maybe look back on, to something that can help redirect or direct where you're at and what you're doing. And, just as you shared one of the titles of my books, 10 Seconds Will Change Your Life Forever. The reality is this. It came down to when I went through the tragedy I did and people meant well and they'd come up to me, Jack, all the time, friends and family and others, and they didn't mean anything bad, but they'd look at me and say, Bobby, you got to take life one day at a time. And I would look at them, Jack, and say, I'm not trying to be rude. Are you crazy? Right now it's 7:20 in the evening. I don't even think I'm going to make it to 7:25. How the flip am I going to get through the day? Yeah. I got to get through this moment, this minute, this 5 minutes. And all of a sudden I started to realize, Jack, for myself, getting through adversity, I take it moment by moment. No matter what I face in life, all I have is like you and I right now. This is all we have. We don't have 5 minutes ago. We don't have 5 minutes from now. We have this. And one of the biggest statements I've made for years is this. Don't let the pain, the mistakes, or the hurt of the past, or the fear of the future to stop you from being present in the present. This present moment matters, and that's all we have. How could I make the most of this moment that will help prepare me for the next moment and help me to embrace the future that I'm about to walk into? But this is all we have. Absolutely. And I think most people lose out on that. And even because I do so much stuff with pro sports, college sports, high school sports, I'll say to my athletes, how many of you have ever heard the expression, play your game one game at a time? Every hand goes up. I go, you tell me what game ever took place one game at a time, and I'll show you every game that took place one play at a time. Yes. And every play has the power to change the momentum, the direction, and the outcome of that game. I always tell people every moment builds patterns, habits, and routines that eventually lead to success or eventually lead to failure. In other words, Jack, if it ain't an act of God, as people use the expression like a hurricane or tornado or an act of nature, an earthquake, a typhoon, a tsunami, everything else that happens in this world, my friend, is because of a choice and a decision that someone or a group has made, good, bad, right, or wrong, that eventually leads to success or eventually leads to failure. I just want to set that precedence right away.
100%. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I couldn't agree with that anymore. We are, like you said, there are so many, whether acts of God or circumstances, we can't help, where we're born or what kind of family we come from or where we're born into, but we can, take from those and make choices about, okay, how do I handle this particular situation or scenario that I'm put in? Like you said, one play at a time. And how do you make the right call? And not that we make the right call 100% of the time, but if you do fail, like how do you learn from that and overcome it? That's incredibly important. And especially, I think when it comes to motivational speaking, especially if you're talking to a younger audience, most kids can tell when someone's being genuine or not. And I think maybe what resonated with me as a kid when I first heard your first speaking engagement at my high school is just there was an authenticity there. Like I felt like okay, this guy he's not necessarily preaching at me or talking at me. Felt like he's talking to me. I felt for a second there I thought he was saying it's like you, Jack, you 10 seconds can change your life if you're not careful. Like I mean, not that you were saying that, of course, but like that's like how I felt in the crowd thinking. So I think making those distinctions, really, really, really makes a difference. especially when you're talking to kids.
Well, I appreciate that. And that's why still in my late 50s, I just turned 60. It's hard for people to believe because I'm a big kid. I love kids. I'll quickly mention it to those, but I went through a tragedy over 30 years ago when a drunk driver crashed through my house, killed my wife, and injured me. It's a miracle I lived. I was run over completely. So literally, I tell people all the time, I had no control over what happened. I had control over how I respond. But the kids at the school I was working at literally rescued me. They loved on me. The day I'm burying my wife, going to the church and the cemetery, literally all 1,200 kids show up on a school day, every teacher, coach, counselor. Yeah. And those kids basically love me back because I always said this. I always had this mindset, Jack. I'm not concerned as much as how Jack feels about me. I'm more concerned with how Jack feels about himself in my presence. Do you feel valued? Do you feel important? Do you feel I really care about you? Like you just said, which I love. I'm being real. I'm being down to earth. I'm being transparent. I'm embracing you and bringing you in a way that I'm not judging you, condemning you, but helping you understand what is the motivation behind your choices and decisions. What is your perception? Because here's the reality. It's what I call very simple perception rejection. The biggest fear that every person has in this world is the fear of rejection. When we've been hurt, when we've been wounded, when we've been rejected, when we face trauma, when we face pain, when we face loss, automatically, as I like to talk about it, the moment you were being formulated in your mother's womb, Jack, is what I share more than ever. That was the locomotive of the train of your life. Who you are at this moment in life, okay, is the caboose. But guess what? All along that path and continuing in your life, you're going to add more cars to that train. Well, here's what I tell people. Every car represents good and bad in our life. Good that has happened and bad. The analogy I like to use real simple, Jack, is when bad happens, that car cannot get off the track, but it's riding sideways, crooked. The wheels are not quite on the track. Well, you know the passengers that jump on that car? The passengers are rejection, fear, anxiety, worry, inadequacy, inferiority. You see what I'm coming from?
Absolutely.
And my goal where healing needs to take place is, and I'm picking on you, but I'm talking to me and everybody else, Jack.
Of course.
You got to kick those passengers off, because if not, they're going to influence everything that happens in your life. And more than ever, when I speak, the number one thing that kids come up to me and say, especially when I'm in person. Now I've had to do a lot of virtual, Skype, Zoom, a lot of Zoom stuff and other things. But the reality is this, Jack, kids come up to me and here's what they say. Their number one phrase, and not only kids, adults too. I thought it was my fault that. And then they go down the list. And usually it's a family issue, but they'll say things like, I thought it was my fault that my parents are separated. My parents are divorced. My dad's an alcoholic. My mother's a drug addict. My dad's in prison. You know what I mean? I've been bullied. I've been picked on. I've been abused physically, emotionally, mentally. I've been sexually abused. I've been bullied. I've wanted to cut myself because I'd rather have the physical pain than the emotional pain. I've thought about killing myself because I really want to kill the pain, not myself. Of course, I get it.
Yeah.
Well, that's why I share this real quick. Is I've learned more than ever to bring this in more than ever. I did at the time when you heard me speak, but I embrace it much more than ever now, and that is this. I say to the audience more than ever, Jack, because I always share a little portion of this story when I get into my stuff. I said, how many of you believe drinking and driving, because he was a drunk driver, killed my wife? Every hand goes up. I go, I disagree with you. I said, drinking and driving had a part in her death, but remember, before a person drives drunk, they got to be drunk in the first place. I said, we're not talking about a 21-year-old or above adult that has a drink or two and wants to be out with friends and not doing anything abusive. I said, when somebody abuses alcohol, drugs, or somebody else, or they abuse anything in this world, There's a why behind the what. And here's the simplicity, Jack.
Yeah.
They're trying to anesthetize and numb the pain that tells them they don't matter, they don't count, they don't fit in, because what has happened to them has helped them to feel rejected, isolated, excluded, and they're going to do whatever it takes. And I got to tell you, I just did an in-person program not too long ago at a school here in St. Petersburg, where I live also. And it was a senior retreat, Jack. It was so awesome. This has never happened in this way before. A teacher came up after me, about to speak to the 100 seniors, and said, what Mr. Petrocelli said is dead on. Could I tell you quickly about my life? And this is what she says. She goes, because I was hurt in life and I felt rejected as a freshman in high school. First thing I did was started to abuse tobacco to fit in with that group. Well, guess what? It didn't work. By the time I'm a sophomore, to get in another group, I start to abuse alcohol. That didn't work. By the time I'm a junior, I get in another group. Okay, because your first two groups, I did not feel good, fit in. I still felt hurt, whatever.
Yeah.
She goes, my junior year, I started to abuse drugs. That didn't work. She goes, by the time I'm a senior, I'm sleeping with whoever I can sleep with because I wanted to be loved. I wanted to be accepted.
Validation.
And Bobby, that's right. That didn't work until finally after my senior year of high school. I got the counseling. I got the help that I really needed. And I started to, like you said, identify where I was hurt, where I was broken, where I was initially rejected, and how that's been trying to define me. Here's one of the biggest statements I make, Jack. Don't allow your brokenness to chase after you, to define you. When people understand that, Jack, all of a sudden they realize, wait a minute, it'd be like this. If I just mistreated you now, of course I'm not, but if I mistreated you, the sad reality is usually the person who's being mistreated, their first perception is rejection. And why is Bobby treating me this way? What did I do wrong? Nothing. Has nothing to do with you. Has everything to do with me. My hurt, my fear, my insecurity, my pain, my own rejection. So I got to get the best of it and let me put Jack down so I could feel better about myself. Yet look what I'm doing. I'm using the wrong thing. And I say this. I'm trying to use a temporary, false, wrong solution, evil solution, excuse the expression, to numb my pain, to help me not feel rejected, but to try to get rid of a permanent issue that doesn't have to be permanent, but I've never dealt with this deeper, bigger issue. I'm just surfacely anesthetizing the pain.
100%. I think that also speaks to sort of a greater conversation that, I mean, I feel like that's coming to light a little bit more, especially recently as, people are more shut in with COVID. But, I've always been a proponent for for people who need it, whether they realize it or not, should definitely go and, get that counseling they need, get the therapy, whatever it is. I mean, and there's still, sometimes there's still a bit of a stigma when it comes to talking about mental health issues.
Absolutely.
100% there is. And I look at it this way, like, well, if you're feeling sick, if you have a cold, what do? You go to the doctor. Or if you're an athlete, or whatever it is, whatever job requires it, you go get a checkup. And it's like, I wish more people would do that and maybe go see someone. And now that's a lot to ask, especially if you have trust issues. I understand that, but that's not a bad habit to get into. Even if you don't think you have issues going on, even if you're feeling okay, it doesn't hurt to have somebody to talk to, whether it's professionally or otherwise. I'm definitely a big proponent of that. And, not that I'm like an activist or anything like that, but I'm just, as someone who has had issues with that and still goes to see someone to this day, I feel like, that conversation, I'm glad that conversation is more acceptable today. I mean, I don't know if that's the right word, but it seems like more people are having it.
Well, let me say this to you, because you're dead on. So you didn't even realize this is so awesome how this is going, Jack. Please know this. Because exactly what you said is what I was about to get into. So you just led me into it. So here's what I say to the audience all the time. I say, in America, they say 43 million people deal with some form of mental sickness or illness. Now watch this. I come back and go, absolutely not. 100% of us do. And I said, here's what we've done with mental sickness and illness. We make it all or nothing. No. Like you said, Jack, this is what I say all the time. I said, you ever have a bad day? They go, yeah. I go, maybe you have a cold mentally, the virus mentally, an earache mentally. Yeah. Maybe you have a sinus infection mentally, a pulled muscle mentally, a cramp mentally, a broken bone mentally. I said, what we have done with mental stuff, and this is what kids come up to me, and I'm so glad you let us into this. Kids and adults will come up to me and say, wow, Bobby, and I'm giving you the quick version right now. I thought before you shared today that if I owned up to what I'm battling with mentally, I'm crazy, there's something wrong with me. You made it so clear that there's not. Why is it okay to go to the doctor for an earache, but if I'm feeling the same way mentally, I have an earache, oh no, I can't go, I'm not crazy. Wait a minute. Talk to somebody, do whatever you can do to get the help. Why is it always such taboo? And I believe people have opened up much more to that today, Jack, and I've been doing it more than ever. When my younger son brought it to my attention and said, Dad, I know you talk about mental sickness and illness to a degree, but you need to spend more time because I think every person goes through it in some way, which I always believed, but I thought I need to spend a little more time on this. And I cannot tell you, like what you just said, Jack, is dead on. And we're right on the same page that by me doing this, there's been more and more kids that have gone to get help. I mean, I've had kids since the beginning, but constantly will reach out to me even after the assembly. I had a girl recently before the pandemic in Florida. She reaches out to me right away. She goes, you have no idea what happened today. And I get tons of these stories, but I'm just using this particular. Yeah. And I'll share another girl real quick. But here's what she says. She goes, I came to school today for one main purpose. I was coming to say goodbye to everybody. When my parents left for work this morning, I hung a rope in the garage. After school, I was planning on going home and ending it all. And then you show up the last period of the day. And you threw all my plans out the window because you told me how much I mattered. You told me the power of every decision. 10 seconds changes lives, changes families, changes everything. And she goes, I couldn't believe it. So long story short, the woman who brought me in, I reach out to that teacher. She's crying hysterical on the phone. She goes, I know this girl her whole life. I would never have dreamed this. So the next thing I know, she gets back to me later that night. She goes, I contacted her parents. We got her into a mental health facility. And she's so excited already over the last couple hours that she's going in the right direction and feeling she's getting help. I had another girl here, and I'm just picking on Florida because this is where we live. Yeah. I had another girl come up to me about a year and a half ago. Jack, I'm trying not to laugh, but it's the truth. She was cursing me out at the end of the assembly, but for a good reason. She goes, where the blankety blank blank were you when my mother was in high school? My mother's serving 11 years in a state penitentiary for creating, distributing, and selling crystal meth. And exactly what you said, those people, the wrong people, influenced her. Because one of the statements I make more than ever, everything good you do in this life and everything boneheaded you do, there's people that have influenced you one way or another. And she goes, you're right. My mother's in prison because of friends from high school that got her to go down the wrong path, that influenced her negatively. Not one of them have visited her the last 3 years she's been in prison. Not one of them have been in her life, yet they influenced what she was doing that brought her to that place. I speak in some of the toughest prisons, not only in our state, throughout this nation. Prisoners come up to me and go, you're right. I'll bet. Because I was rejected, hurt, and broken. I wanted that acceptance. I wanted that love. And I didn't care what it took. I went down the wrong path just to temporarily asphyxiate my brokenness and my pain. And it didn't work. And I'm in prison because of that. I wish I could have heard your message sooner.
100%. I mean, so many of, so many societal issues, you can be traced to just that simple, matter of how we interact with each other. I mean, I don't know, a lot of people like to blame a lot of different things, whether it's social media or, the culture today or what have you. And I'm not saying they're right or wrong or whatever, but it's like, people have been interacting like this with each other since the beginning of time. And regardless of what the mechanism is, you still you still make choices at the end of the day about how you treat
Absolutely.
one another and how you treat yourself. And and those things do matter, no pun intended. But getting to your recent book, your You Matter, It Doesn't. I know that's something you've really taken on in recent years. The You Matter, is that almost like a movement or something? The way you put it out there. Can you maybe explain a little bit more about what this book is about specifically?
So long story short, literally, probably right after you heard me speak, I began to really embrace. I would mention it a little bit, but very little, like when you heard me speaking prior to that. After you heard me speak, probably like in the mid 2000s, earlier 2000s, like after you graduated high school, like probably 18, 17 years ago. What happens is one of my buddies come up to me and he says to me, one of my closest friends for 40 years from college, he goes, Petro, he goes, listen to me. He goes, I know you kind of embrace this. He said, you share so much deeper and more than what happened to you, what you've literally been doing all this time. And you've even been doing it a little bit already, but you're telling your audience, you matter. It doesn't. Leave your it in the past. Don't let your it control your life. You've been saying that, Petro. Let's narrow it down even that much more, because you're going to keep on talking about the power of the moment in 10 seconds. But let's do that. So literally, like in the last 18, 19 years, I've exploded more with it, because here's what happened. The kids basically at the school I was at when I went through the tragedy showed me how much I mattered. That
Right.
this
No,
did
you were the
not have to define.
So sorry to interrupt. You were coaching football there at the time, were you not?
Right. And I was coaching at the time of the tragedy. I was coaching football, but I had been a football and baseball coach in
Got
the
it.
school. Absolutely.
Okay, and this was in Texas?
This was in Texas, and actually the school is called Santa Fe. 2.5 years ago, they went through a school shooting. I've been
Oh,
back to Santa Fe 7 times
I
since,
bet.
addressing the community, because
Yeah.
some of my former students, I still have relationships with them, literally over 30 years later,
I'll bet.
through especially social media. I go back, I see them, their
Sure.
kids, and many of their kids were in the school in Santa Fe, and literally I would go to the school every 4 years to speak. I was supposed to go that next fall. Well, this kid who did the shooting never met me, never saw me, never knew who I was. And my heart broke, because if I could have been there sooner, maybe we could have put an end to this, what was going on in his life that had never happened.
Absolutely.
But I'm
Absolutely.
actually going back, just so you know this, I'm going back about a week from now, and I'll be back in Santa Fe again for the 8th time, being with the community and just helping them through
Awesome.
this. And they're Santa Fe strong, been working through this.
Yeah.
And in all these years, you may not know this, I've had the privilege of doing work with 9/11 families. I've had the privilege of doing work with after school shootings. Anytime there's been tragedies in schools. I had the Oklahoma City bombing 25 years ago. I went on the 1 year anniversary to speak, and I've been back there other times. So I love when I could go in. And as I like to say, because you mentioned this earlier, the good Lord does this for all of us, Jack.
Yeah.
When you go through something, there's certain principles and comfort that you got to get through that. The good book even says, with the same comfort that you received and what basically helped you through your mess is what I want to use through you. It's like the good Lord saying to you, I want to use through you to help others as they go through their mess,
Sure.
And that's what I learned when I was first going through this. I realized this, Jack. There's other people who went through tragedies that made it through it. How did they get through it? They're not better than me. I'm not better than them. And I always say this more than ever in every area of life. If you have a desire to do something, whatever it may be, find out somebody who has done it and what they know and have done that you don't know and you have not done. Because once again, every pathway leads to success or failure. You want to get on that pathway that will lead you to success and get rid of the things that will get you down the wrong way and get you going in the right way to overcome or get through or do the right stuff, whatever you need to do.
Absolutely. Yeah. I couldn't have said it better myself. I mean, and that's great that you're still going back to the school there and dealing with them, especially in light of what's going on. The school shootings. That's certainly nothing new. Unfortunately, it seems to happen every couple of years. And I'm not going to get into all the debates about what should or shouldn't be done about it. But the fact is that it happens, and it's how we deal with it that really matters. It's something things like that getting to this, sort of overall theme that we're getting into of how we communicate with each other and how we make decisions that impact one another. I mean, it's especially resonating with me now that I have two kids of my own, now that I have two little girls, and it's funny because I remember when you came to speak at my high school, you said you had you had a little wild-sized photo of one of your sons, of one of
Yeah.
your sons. I forget which one it was. I know you
It
have
was my
two.
oldest son, Alec. It was my oldest son, Alec.
Yeah,
And I
so
pulled him out,
yeah,
and then I would actually pull the other one out of Aaron too. I actually pulled them both out. I haven't done that in a while, but yeah, I used to show the wild size pictures. Now my son, Alec, is 28. He's 6'3". He played college football at UNC Chapel Hill, and he coaches college football in Oklahoma. Excuse me. He was in Oklahoma. He's now in North Carolina coaching college football. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so it's wild, though, like you said, those wallet-sized pictures. But getting back to what you're saying here, here's the problem that I think as general. And this is what I love what you said in the very beginning, because I always felt this, Jack, and you just reiterated when I would speak to people. I don't want to come to Jack, and that's why what you said, I was transparent, I was real, I embraced it. It's something that I'm down to earth and being real with people. I don't want to come and say to Jack, bear with me. Don't drink and drive. Don't abuse drugs. Talk nice. Be kind to people. Get help. Do all these things. Yeah, that's good. But guess what? That's secondary. If Jack does not understand what's influencing his choices in the first place, I'm not going to help Jack to overcome the negativity that could be going on in his life. The more Jack understands that we all want to be loved, we all want to be accepted, we have all been rejected and hurt. If that hurt and that pain and those passengers do not get kicked off that train car, okay, it's going to affect my perception of myself, others, the world, even God. It's going to affect that. And therefore, if my perception becomes distorted of who I am, then watch this. My decisions are going to become distorted on how I try to deal with it because I'm going down the wrong path. In other words, I'm trying to find a temporary solution to a deeper issue. And my goal is to help kids understand there's deeper issues in all of our lives. If we don't embrace it and address it and get it worked on and helped, then it's going to come out somehow, some way. Some more severe than others. There's varying degrees of hurt, pain, and brokenness.
Oh, yeah.
Okay? Sometimes people think, well, I didn't go through – that doesn't matter. If you didn't go through that, you still went through other things that have caused rejection and pain in your life.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I do that all the time, too. When it comes to, like, talking about stuff, about, like, being bullied when I was a kid and stuff like that. And, and it's usually kind of my nature anyway. I'm a little self-deprecating anyway. I can be like, all right, it's like, look, I've had it pretty good over the years. I have both my parents, God bless them, they're still with us. I had it pretty good. Like, and so it's like, oh, I shouldn't complain too much because, a lot of people have had it a lot worse than me. But, you're right. Like, it's okay to talk about your feelings and to be sad and to validate them. But it's also okay to be happy too.
Absolutely.
And it seems like such an obvious thing, but like even like what you're saying, you matter. Like sometimes, especially kids when they're going through that age, like they need someone to tell them that. Whether or not they're getting it from home, I don't know. But like, these things, I mean, yeah, saying stuff like you matter, like that matters to a lot of people, ironically enough. No pun intended.
No, absolutely. But here's the point. So what do they do? Just like that teacher shared, to know that she mattered. She ran to tobacco abuse, drug abuse, alcohol abuse, and sexual abuse in a sense, just trying to get any kind of attention and acceptance to numb the pain. It's almost like sometimes, and I don't say this in a judgmental form to anybody, but so many times the sad reality, Jack, even sometimes in the medical community, is because so many people will not go after the root behind what is causing their illness or their sickness or their problem. So the first thing they're going to do, and please don't get me wrong, I'm not knocking medication, but I don't think our bodies were created unless it's a sickness that needs medication full time. So there's a lot of things I've seen in my own life, and this came to fruition like 10 years ago. I had put on this extra weight, and I go to the doctor, and they do my blood. Oh, everything's off the charts. from cholesterol to, pre-diabetes to rheumatoid arthritis, all these different things, way off the charts. Long story short, I lose weight. I change some of my diet. I do some things better. I go back. There wasn't a trace of any of that stuff because all of a sudden I made some adjustments. Can that happen in every sickness? No. But I truly believe in the stuff I've studied and seen. 85 to 90% of most of illnesses, are brought upon people by the lifestyles they live, their lack of doing the right thing, nutrition and other stuff. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. That's not every case. Of course not. But if people make changes, so think about that. If we're just only dealing with physical stuff, right? Mm-hmm. How many mental things, how many other choices and decisions are going on in people's lives that if they don't, they're just going after symptoms. So in other words, drinking and driving is a symptom. Drug abuse is a symptom. Alcohol abuse is a symptom. They're not the deep-rooted issue. That's what I've gone after more than ever. I've always covered it, but I've gone after it more than ever in the last 15 to almost 20 years. After you heard me speak, it's like, wait a minute. I talk about this a little. I got to spend much more time to help kids understand the depth of how they're hurt, their pain, their trauma, their wounds, their rejection affects their perception of themselves, others, and decisions they make.
Gotcha. Absolutely. And this brought up an interesting question that I wanted to talk to you about because, you do this for a living. You're a motivational speaker and, you've seen the effect that you have on other people. And you did mention that, people do influence negatively or positively in either way. So, I want to ask you, who are some of the people in your life that have influenced this mindset in you?
Well, one of the biggest speakers that I heard way back in the day was a guy by the name of Dave Reaver. Okay. I heard him in 1987. I've already gone through the tragedy, but I started to research other people at the time, and he was one of the big ones I started to research. When Ava was killed at the end of 85, beginning of 86, I started to research Dave Reaver a little bit, and then in 87, I really got to watch his program. And long story short, Dave Reaver was in Vietnam, okay? And while he's in Vietnam, he's getting ready to throw a phosphorus grenade when it was shot in his hand and blew up his whole body. He was literally burned. He should have been dead 10 times over. It's a miracle he lived. Wow. But I watched how he was so real and down to earth. And then also, my buddy, one of my best friends from college, his nickname was Cheeks. I met him in 1980. Mm-hmm. He had done some stuff in TV and some stuff in the media realm and acting and other things. And he said to me, Petro, just always speak from your heart, be yourself. And I kind of felt that anyway, because even as a coach and a teacher, I would do that. He just put the confirmation. Well, when I saw what Dave Reaver went through, and the two funniest things when I watched Dave Reaver, how he took his tragedy, he said, I'm a living band roll on. And he would pull off his wig and he had a bald head, and kids would get a kick out of that. This is over 30-something years ago. Well, when I saw him 35 years ago, and then the best part was he goes, his fingers were like this, no joke, and his face is all scarred up. And he goes, when I play the piano by ear. And he would pull off one of his plastic ears and start playing the piano. I was on the floor. But the kids loved it because you can see Dave was so real. But I saw the format of the things Dave did. And then I would just watch different other speakers and pick up on different things because everybody's got something you can learn. Well, I really want to do that. And I don't know if I'm going to do that. I don't think they're getting personal enough. And I would get kind of feedback from people. My buddy Cheeks, when I was first starting to speak, in the early 1990s, he would come up to me. He would travel with me some, and he'd come up to me and say, Petro, your program was awesome, but, and then he starts going down the list. This was great, but you should have expounded on it a little more. This, and then all of a sudden, it was fine tuning. And then what I would focus on, because I would get bombarded by kids all the time, and then I would ask kids the question. And so much of what I did would feed off of what as I went into the future, I said, well, tell me what you liked about the program. And they would start pouring into me. And I wouldn't even, what I'm getting at, Jack, is even with the kids, I wouldn't even focus on negative things. Don't get me wrong. But when I focused on the positive things, I realized, wait a minute, if that spoke to them, then I'm going to even put more time and effort in that. So I'll automatically start getting rid of the negative stuff because here's what spoke to them. And let's say 5 or 10 kids come up to me hypothetically, and each one has a different point. I'm going to expound on those points. And everywhere I would go, that's how I grew, because those are the people I'm trying to reach. And the fact that you're sitting here and we're talking and doing this, which I'm honored, I'm so honored because of what you've shared. And I've had other people constantly through Facebook and social media and emails and text messages, the things they say. I got one today. I was just like, I was in tears. I was in tears. I get this all the time. What people say, like, here's what it was. I wish somebody happy birthday on Facebook that I'm a friend with. He goes, his exact words were, wow. You have no idea how you blew me away. You have been my mentor for years, ever since I heard you speak in my school. And you took the time and effort, you of all people, you have no idea what you did for me on my birthday. And I'm like in tears. And I said, I'm honored and I'm grateful. I do that all the time, and I get those type of responses on a regular basis. I'm honored because here's the reality, Jack. Do we need money to live? Absolutely. But the good book even says not money. It's the love of money. If my whole life is based on money, I'm going to get myself in trouble. Just like if my whole life is based on other things that we could distort. To me, social media is phenomenal, but it also could be a distortion and a distraction. Okay. Like anything else. And here's the reality. What I say to people, and I say to you right now, and I'll say to everybody else who hears this, you know what success in life is? Finding something you love and have a great passion about. Number one. Number two, you're helping impact, change the lives of other people. And number three, you're able to make a living at it. That's the last part. You're able to make a living. You found exactly what you need to do. You can make a living, and that's not making you go crazy, but you're doing something you loved. And working with kids, people say to me all the time, I do some corporate stuff. I do pro sports. I've spoken to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers in the years I've lived here 6 different times. The only reason why I didn't get to speak to them this year is because they weren't allowing outside people to come in. I've spoke to Clemson University 4 out of the last 5 years. I didn't go in this year, their football program, because they can't let outside people come in because of COVID. Right. So, and they didn't want to do virtual stuff. They just used in-person, in-house people. Not a problem. I say that honored, but still to me, as I was trying to figure out recently, Jack, I've spoken more than 6,000, close to 6,500 times in over 30 years. Okay.
That's a lot of hours.
And it is. And out of all those programs, I've spoken in high school assemblies more than 4,500 times. There's some repeated stuff, but out of that, that's my number one audience, followed by college students, followed by middle school students. So literally out of the 6,500 programs, I would probably say 5,700 are educational groups, maybe even closer to 6,000. The other 500 are a little of everything else. But most of them are educational groups, including Make-A-Wish Foundation, Special Olympics, those type of things.
Absolutely. I remember when the couple times that I saw you as a kid, and you mentioned a few things that kind of rang true with me, and not that you were trying to not that it was directed towards me specifically, and you didn't say it in it wasn't a contrived or pandering way, but I remember you quoting one of my favorite bands, Papa Roach, Last Resort, losing my sight, losing my mind, wish somebody would tell me I'm fine. And I thought, wow, I never really thought about it that way, but that's a cry for help if there ever was one. And that goes, back to what we had talked about earlier about how that tends to be the root of, the root of so many of these issues that people have, this mental cold or sickness or however you want to describe it that leads to those decisions. It's funny how music can have certain quotes or certain lines that kind of put you in a particular mood or I should say that motivate you to do a certain thing, or whether it's, expressing those feelings or expressing something that helps other people. And ironically enough, I got one from Ozzy Osbourne of all people. He and this was later in his career. He has a song called "Life Won't Wait." It's only came out about 11 years ago, so it's not like one of his early stuff back in the day, but there's a passage in that song that says, Every day that you wait, you're falling faster. No sleight of hand, no twist of fate, no ever after. When it's gone, it's gone. I'll fight to the bitter end. Life won't wait for you.
That's absolutely.
Like things like that. Like I'll hear things like that, and that can motivate. I'd be like, yeah, I better get on it, man. Life won't wait for me. Let's do this. And it's, that's the great thing about having that outlet, having expressions like that. And I know this isn't necessarily related to what you're talking about, but it's something that I wanted to talk.
No, absolutely, it is. It's all about you matter.
Exactly, and it touched on something that, hearing you quote, the Papa Roach song "Last Resort," that always stuck with me for whatever reason, and
which is awesome.
And so, it's always funny how you can find inspiration in so many little things from your day-to-day life that you might not necessarily be the intention, might not be what they were trying to do, but like you can take something like that, whatever it is, whether it's a random quote from an Ozzy Osbourne song or whatever song it is, and use that and make your life better with it, then that's a beautiful thing.
Well, as you're even saying that, Jack, one of the biggest things, and I've always done this, but I even spend more time doing this towards the end. And I say to everybody, I said, could you imagine if everybody in this audience that's listening to me now, whether virtual, even in the virtual situations or in person, said, could you imagine if everybody in this audience took 1 moment a day, 10 seconds or less, and did something, said something, or acted and responded to another person to help them know that they matter? That's the simple key. That's the simple key. And what's wild? I'll walk through Walmart, Target, Publix, and I'll be online and I look at the cashier and I'll say to the cashier, and it blows them away. I'll go, you got the greatest job in the world. And they're like, what? What do you mean? I said, do you know every single person who comes through this line that you will wait on and bring up their bill and take care of them? Every single person coming through this line has a story to tell. You don't know what they've been through, what they're even going through right now. You don't know. They could be on the way to a funeral. They could be coming from the hospital.
Everybody's got a story.
Everybody's got a story. And I said, you might say one thing or do one thing that could change their life and impact them forever. I said, you heard, and to me, this because you shared it. That one moment changed my life forever. Okay. A truck crashing through my house. There's been other moments that have changed my life, no question. But here's the point. We're not even talking about something that dramatic. Okay. I cannot tell you, look at the one girl who I mentioned earlier about the fact that she was going to commit suicide at the end. And I've had so many of those stories over the years. And what troubles me is I think about the sad realities, how many schools I did not get to go to. There was 50 or 60,000 kids I would have spoken to in the spring alone. Okay. I didn't get to speak to any of them. Now, it's not about me. I'm not being arrogant, but
I hear you.
How about people in the school that they couldn't go to? And literally the sad reality in this whole thing is during this entire time, the suicide rate from elementary school through 24-year-olds is the highest it's ever been. Because kids have gotten so far out of whack when yet, I watch schools that I've traveled at, like even our state of Florida, for the most part, has been as close to normal as possible. They have changes, but other states where they've shut down public schools other than virtual, and they have private schools open, and I've spoken to some of them in person, and I'm amazed at how much more phenomenal the kids are doing because they're as close to normal. They're not total normal. We get it. But these kids want to be. My niece in the state of Virginia, she's a junior in high school. She wants to go back. I have a friend in Oklahoma that they asked if a school, 4,000 kids go to the school, 3,500 kids represented by their parents at the beginning of the school year all said, we want our kids in full-time school. We'll sign any release, any document. They still never did it. They're doing half virtual, half in person. When most kids are just saying, forget it, we're just going to do virtual because the way this is broken up, we don't even like it. The point I'm getting at is, well, why did those 85% of parents vote and say we want our kids in school and we'll sign anything to release them? I'm just saying we have to look at that seriously. Kids want that. They need to be in that environment because they're never going to be in that environment again once they leave high school, leave middle school. and they want that opportunity. So I'm big on that.
Yeah, no, I 100%. Like I know, like, I've got five little nieces and nephews that are kind of going through that. My cousin's oldest son, I have one cousin, his oldest son just graduated high school last year. And it's just like, he didn't get to go to his senior prom or anything. Like he ended up going right to college. It's just like his senior year got cut short when this thing happened last year. It's like, man, I could not imagine going through something like that at that age. Like it's a crazy time right now that this, with this plague that's on our world right now. But it's all about staying positive and
Absolutely.
hearing messages from guys like yourself, I think makes all the difference in the world to a lot of people. And I think if there's any silver lining in all of this, is that people are having those conversations more. At least I would hope so. And hopefully that is one of the takeaways from all this thing whenever it gets back to normal. And I pray to God that it happens soon. And I believe that it will.
I agree. Well, 3 things I'll say these real quick. One, in this world, for all of us, starting with me and you, in this world, pain is inevitable. Suffering is optional. In other words, how much we allow ourselves to suffer is how we respond. Everything's dealing with response. Okay. Number 2, in this world, offenses are inevitable. Forgiveness is optional. I chose to forgive a man, not to condone his wrong. And what I say to my audience is more than ever, and people always, I said, show me one family, one marriage, one individual life, what career has ever gotten better when unforgiveness and bitterness was at the center of that. Show me. Never. And last but not least, in this world, change is inevitable. Growth is optional. How much we grow out of that change is how we respond, react, and what we choose to do or not to do. And here's what even helps me, and I want everybody to hear this, please. When I allow, we all do at times, anxiety and worry and fear, panic and chaos to get us in the way, when I overcome it, which is most of the time, not all the time, but when I overcome it, the first thing I say to myself is, by me thinking this, feeling this, and acting upon this, am I making my situation any better? Am I changing my situation? Am I changing the fear from being there? By the way, I'm giving into it. No, I'm not making it better. So what could I do at this moment that could help me get back on track? Because as I said earlier, pain of the past, fear of the future, it'll stop us from being present in the present when we focus on it. When we drive a car, you don't drive your car looking in the rearview mirror the whole time or looking past where you're at, looking so far in front of you that you're going to miss what's going on around you. You glance up front, but you also glance behind you, but you're right in that present place where you're at that moment. That's vital.
Yeah, I mean, Bobby, this is awesome. I feel like you and I could talk for like 5 hours about stuff like this, but it's great to reconnect with you after all these years.
I'm honored, absolutely honored.
It's pretty cool. I didn't even know you were living in Tampa and St. Pete, because I knew you were based in, all around the country. So, it's cool that you're in that area. I'm in Orlando now, but I'll have to look you up next time I'm in town.
Absolutely. And anytime we could do this again in the future, anything you want to talk about, don't ever hesitate. And people can check me out. I'm all over social media. And I'll say this last thing, if it's okay. I don't spend a lot of time on this. Here's my book, 10 Seconds. Here's my book, You Matter. Here's our You Matter wristband. I always tell people, here's what I do. And I've been doing this for 14 years now. When people get books or wristbands or anything, I have been taking the money and I've teamed up with an organization based out of Dallas. And here's what we've done with the help of others. We have rescued 150,000 kids sold into human and sex trafficking around the world and in America. And the coolest part is, here's the coolest part. When people have gotten books, whether it's students, teachers, or other groups I speak to, they have been part of rescuing those kids. That's what's so awesome about the whole thing. They get a book, yet they're part of helping save and rescue lives. So I'm honored. Never hesitate to reach out to me. I'd be more than honored to work with you, buddy.
You bet. 10seconds.org is the website. That's the number 10seconds.org. You Matter, It Doesn't is the name of the book. And 10 seconds can change your life, 10 seconds will change your life is the
10 seconds. Yeah. And here you can see it right there. 10 seconds will change your life forever.
Gotcha. Emphasis on the
power
will.
of every moment. Absolutely.
For sure. Bobby, where can the folks find you on social media and access some of your some of your stuff?
Well, YouTube, there's a lot of videos and stuff on YouTube, but the two biggest things I go to is basically Facebook and Instagram, and then Twitter, but mostly Facebook and Instagram are the two major things that I do most of my correspondence. And of those two, probably Facebook, and then of course, my website and emails and that type of thing.
Awesome. Awesome. Thank you, sir. Thank you very much for being on.
Thanks, buddy. Absolutely honored. Best to you always.
Thanks once again to the great Bobby Petrocelli for coming on and just sharing all his words of wisdom. I don't normally do these types of podcasts. Normally I tend to keep things a little bit lighter, just more entertainment based. But I gotta say, this might be one of the more important episodes I've done. I think I can't imagine anyone listening to this guy speak and not get something out of it. It's he's a great guy, great speaker. Please, by all means, go check out his stuff if you can. 10seconds.org is the website. He also has another website called the You Matter Movement. Sorry, that's theyoumattermovement.com. I'll have links to all this in the description, and of course follow him on Instagram and Twitter at Bobby Petrocelli. Yeah, I mean, again, this guy's amazing. He's someone who really made an impression on me when I was a kid, and I was glad that I was able to look him up and have him on the show. Just incredible life story that this guy has had, and just has overcome a lot, and the fact that he's taken something terrible and used that to make other people's lives better is huge. Like there's nothing more you can say about that. So thanks again to Bobby, and hopefully he'll come back on again one of these days. If you're new to the show, make sure you follow me on Twitter and Instagram at jackxconnor. Like me on Facebook at facebook.com/jackconnormusic. Also, feel free to check out the rock bands I'm in. Vertebreaker at facebook.com/vertebreakerband, and Mature Musical Pictures at maturemusicalpictures.com. And as always, if you have any questions, comments, or suggestions, make sure you email me at jackconnorpodcast@gmail.com or tweet me with the hashtag Phoenix Report. If you're listening to this on YouTube, make sure you subscribe, hit the notification bell, leave a comment, go back and listen to some of the other episodes. Depending on where you're hearing this from, if you're Bobby Petrocelli fans and you want to hear some of the episodes I've done, by all means, feel free. They're not all going to be as inspirational and serious as this, but if you're interested in it, feel free. Thank you guys as always for listening. This has been the Phoenix Report. I'm Jack Connor. I'll see you later.